It began on a morning that looked like any other in San Giovanni Rotondo. Yet everyone who lived near the friary swore there were days when the air seemed heavier, as if the invisible world pressed closer to the stones of that courtyard. On those days, they whispered, Padre Pio suffered more intensely, the enemy prowled more fiercely, and souls walked in carrying wounds deeper than any human eye could see. This particular morning would become one of the most unsettling testimonies of his ministry, remembered by friars for decades. Before we move deeper into this story, I'd love to know something from you. Where are you watching from today? Your city, your country. It helps this community grow, and it reminds us all how far these stories of the saints still travel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, consider doing so. It's one of the ways you help us keep these accounts alive for the next generation. Now, around the late 1930s, the lines for Padre Pio's confessional wrapped around the church even before sunrise. People waited in silence, sometimes for hours, clutching rosaries, photographs, letters, and small pieces of hope. Many came frightened, unsure, broken. Yet others came with a strange mix of bravado and entitlement, expecting the sacrament to function like a machine. Insert words, receive forgiveness, without offering their hearts. It was these people who often caused Padre Pio the deepest suffering, not because their sins were unusual, but because their resistance to grace was total. Padre Pio possessed a gift, or a burden, depending on how you look at it, that very few saints in history have held to such a degree. He could see the interior state of a soul. Not just guess, not merely sense. He saw it. Sometimes in images, sometimes in sudden clarity, sometimes in a wave of spiritual stench that made him tremble. When someone approached confession sincerely, even if they were drenched in serious sin, he felt compassion. But when someone approached with arrogance, deceit, or mockery, something inside him recoiled in pain. Around 1935-1942, peak years of spiritual warfare around him, Padre Pio often said he could feel the presence of demons clinging to certain penitents. Not imaginary, symbolic demons, the real spiritual forces that distort the soul's light. At times, he even experienced nausea or physical pain when such a soul came near. His brothers in the friary witnessed this more than once. His hands shaking, his breath tightening, his eyes narrowing as if he were looking at something horrific just behind the person standing in front of him. And then came that woman. Her confession transformed into one of the most chilling moments recorded in the friary's testimonies. When she entered the church, nothing seemed unusual. Yet a few people claimed later they had felt a strange coldness move through the line. She walked with confidence, almost theatrical assurance, as if attending a social visit instead of approaching the sacrament that deals directly with eternal salvation. Her steps echoed lightly on the stone floor as she approached Padre Pio's confessional, unaware or uninterested in the gravity of what she was about to attempt. Padre Pio, exhausted from hours of hearing confessions, lifted his eyes gently to indicate she could enter. But the instant he saw her, everything inside him changed. Witnesses said his expression snapped from calm attentiveness into something sharp, stunned, pained, as if he had been struck across the face by an invisible hand. He turned his head violently to the side, refusing to meet her gaze a second time. His shoulders stiffened, his breath quickened. Something in her presence had pierced him. "Leave," he said. Not shouted, not growled, but spoken with a quiet authority that froze the space around them. The woman stared at him, bewildered. She protested. She insisted she was there to confess. But Padre Pio didn't move. He didn't blink. He didn't look toward her again. His face remained turned away, almost pressed toward the wooden wall of the confessional, as if her presence caused him actual pain. "I cannot look at you," he said with a trembling intensity that several friars later remembered. "Go." The line behind her fell completely silent. Some gasped. A few stepped back instinctively. They had heard stories, rumors that Padre Pio refused absolution to those who mocked the sacrament or hid their sins. But no one there had ever seen him react like this. Not with such visible distress, not with such visceral spiritual recoil. The woman left in humiliation and anger, muttering that the friar was cruel, judgmental, perhaps even insane. But Padre Pio did not move for several minutes after she walked away. The friars noticed his hands were shaking, and he pressed them against his knees as though steadying himself after a physical blow. Later, one of the friars, someone close to him, someone allowed to ask questions others could not, approached him gently, trying to understand what had just happened. It was rare for Padre Pio to speak openly about the visions or sensations he received in the confessional, but this time, the moment had been so dramatic that explanation felt necessary. Padre Pio answered slowly with visible grief. "She came to offend God, not to receive him," he said. "What stood before me was not her face. It was the appearance of the enemy." The friar, stunned, asked what he meant. Padre Pio continued, "There are souls so engulfed in grave sin, so unwilling to let go of the darkness that they no longer appear as themselves. Her soul was deformed, twisted, surrounded by a hatred that was not hers alone. When she looked at me, it was like looking into a pit." He then revealed the deeper truth. The woman had been living a life of betrayal, adultery, deception, mocking confession, receiving sacraments while refusing any intention of conversion. She did not come to be reconciled. She came to pretend she was fine, to calm her conscience without changing anything, to receive absolution without repentance, a spiritual impossibility. "I can forgive sins," Padre Pio said, "but I cannot forgive someone who refuses to be forgiven." He explained that the woman had allowed sin to take root so deeply that her soul projected a spiritual distortion. What he saw was not merely symbolic, it was what the demonic influence had sculpted within her. Darkness clinging to her like a second face. "Some people carry the scent of heaven," he often said. "Others carry the stench of hell." The friars later recorded that Padre Pio felt a deep sorrow for her, not anger. He prayed for her afterward, even though she left furious. He prayed that one day she would return wanting mercy, not spiritual anesthesia. This moment became one of the clearest examples of what he meant when he said, "Confession is a tribunal of mercy, not a theater. If you come to lie to yourself, I cannot defend you." The days following that disturbing encounter unsettled everyone in the friary. People knew Padre Pio carried invisible burdens, but rarely did they see one weigh so heavily on him. He walked more slowly. His eyes lingered longer on the crucifix. At times, while praying the rosary, he stopped mid-sentence, as if remembering a sight he wished he could erase. The friars didn't press him for more explanations. They knew enough about the spiritual world to understand that whatever he had seen that day had wounded him deeply. Yet the story does not end with the moment he expelled the woman. In fact, what happened afterward reveals even more about the spiritual gift, some would say torment, that Padre Pio carried. And it reveals the terrifying reality of approaching the sacraments without the intention to change. A few days later, the woman returned, not to confess, at least not immediately. She arrived furious. Her voice echoed through the courtyard as she demanded to see the superior. Those who overheard her said she kept repeating the same accusation. "Padre Pio insulted me. Padre Pio humiliated me." She insisted that she had been treated unjustly, that she simply wanted absolution, that she deserved to be heard. To the friars who knew the truth, her outrage only confirmed Padre Pio's discernment. The superior listened with patience. He did not scold her or defend Padre Pio harshly. Instead, he asked her gently, "Why do you want to confess? Do you desire to leave your sin? Do you want to return to God?" She hesitated. Her anger cracked for a moment, revealing something underneath. A stubbornness, a refusal to surrender control, a deep wound that had been festering for years. Then, with renewed indignation, she insisted the priest was wrong to judge her. She wanted absolution, she said, because it was her right. But absolution is not a right. It is a gift, a divine gift that requires only one thing in return: humility of heart. The superior knew he could not push further. He told her kindly to return when she was ready to prepare her soul genuinely. She left again, frustrated, bitter, and spiritually unchanged. Padre Pio, however, already knew she would come back. He later explained to a friar that souls who approach the confessional with arrogance often go through a period of turmoil before grace softens them. Some take hours, others take years, but if they don't refuse God completely, grace presses on them, like water finding even the smallest opening in stone. Meanwhile, Padre Pio continued his exhausting daily mission. The days in San Giovanni Rotondo were relentless. Crowds poured into the friary by the thousands, many traveling for days just to spend a few seconds with him. Some came seeking miracles, others came to challenge him. Some came in desperation, believing he was their last hope. And in the middle of all this, Padre Pio carried visions, battles, discernments, and spiritual attacks that no human body should have been able to withstand. He often said that the confessional was the place where the greatest battles were fought, not on battlefields, not in political arenas, but in that small wooden box where eternity hangs in the balance for every soul that enters. Yet the war intensified during that period of the late 1930s and early 1940s. Demon attacks became more violent. At night, the friars often found Padre Pio bruised, with torn clothing, sometimes bleeding. They heard noises from his cell, thuds, crashes, the sound of fists hitting the floor. Yet when they rushed in, the room was empty except for the trembling friar kneeling in prayer. It was in that spiritual climate that the woman returned, this time not with rage but with something almost worse, a mask of indifference. She stood in line again, arms crossed, gaze cold, but something about her had changed. Padre Pio said later that the enemy had tightened its grip on her soul, twisting her emotions into apathy, a far more dangerous state than anger. When she entered the confessional this second time, Padre Pio did not look up right away. He sensed her before he saw her. The air grew heavy. A chill spread through his arms. He recognized the same spiritual distortion hovering over her, though less violently than before. He closed his eyes and prayed silently. Lord, give her light. Give her even a spark. Finally, he lifted his gaze, slowly, cautiously, and for a brief moment he looked directly at her. She stared back with the same lifeless expression, and then Padre Pio felt something he had not felt in decades. A wave of sorrow so sharp it nearly broke him. He said later that it was not the sorrow of judgment. It was the sorrow of witnessing a soul suffocating itself. "Why are you here?" he asked quietly. She shrugged. "I told you. I want absolution." "For what?" he pressed. She hesitated again, just like with the superior. Her eyes darted to the floor, then away, then back to Padre Pio. She seemed almost irritated by her own conscience, as if something inside her was trying to break through a thick wall she had spent years building. "There is nothing to confess," she finally muttered. "Nothing serious." Padre Pio leaned forward. The friars who recorded this account said he spoke with a softness that felt supernatural. "Daughter," he said, "you know that is not true." She stiffened. "You are living a double life," he continued. "One life for the world, and one life hidden in darkness. You want forgiveness without change. You want peace without surrender. You want heaven without leaving hell." His voice remained gentle, but his words cut deeply, exposing the truth she refused to acknowledge. For the first time, her facade cracked. Tears welled up, but anger returned just as fast. She clenched her fists and snapped, "You have no right to speak to me that way." Padre Pio did not react. He lowered his head and whispered, "I am not speaking to judge you. I am speaking to save you." But the enemy does not release a soul easily. She stood abruptly, nearly knocking the small cloth curtain aside. She glared at him with a strange intensity, one that several witnesses said chilled them to the bone. "You're wrong about me," she hissed. "You don't know anything." Padre Pio closed his eyes again. He felt a sharp, stabbing pain in his chest, the same pain he often felt during demonic attacks. Later, he described it as the enemy's resistance. When he opened his eyes, she was already gone, storming out of the church, the wooden door slamming behind her. That night, Padre Pio could not sleep. The friars heard him pacing in his cell, praying urgently, not for himself, but for her. He asked God to break through her pride, to give her even a single moment of clarity, to drown out the voice whispering that she was beyond help, because no one is beyond help unless they choose to be. The next morning, Padre Pio attended Mass with visible exhaustion, his face pale and drawn. But during the homily, witnesses recall he said something unplanned, something that seemed to hang in the air like a divine warning. Pray for souls who pretend to seek God. Their danger is greater than those who openly reject Him. For the lukewarm soul is asleep on the edge of an abyss. It was clear he was speaking about the woman, but also about countless others like her. This was not the end of the story. The true climax, the moment of terror and mercy intertwined, was still to come. The final part of this story begins not in the confessional, but in the hallway just outside Padre Pio's cell. It was late afternoon, the kind of hour when the sun sinks low enough to cast long shadows across the monastery floor. A young friar, Brother Leon, was passing through when he heard something unusual. Padre Pio's voice, faint and strained, as though he were debating with someone who wasn't there. The friar stopped, listened, and immediately sensed the unmistakable atmosphere of one of Padre Pio's spiritual battles. Inside the cell, Padre Pio knelt beside his bed. His hands trembled as he gripped his rosary. He kept repeating the same plea. Lord, give her light. Give her one moment to see herself. Those who knew him best often said that Padre Pio didn't merely pray for souls. He fought for them. It wasn't poetic language. It was literal. He wrestled with invisible forces that wanted those souls kept in darkness. That night, the struggle intensified. At around 2 a.m, several friars reported hearing thuds, scraping sounds, and muffled cries from his room, the unmistakable signs of demonic assault. This was common enough that the friars had learned not to panic, but the severity and duration of the noises troubled them. When dawn finally approached, they found Padre Pio exhausted, his habit torn near the shoulder, and bruises forming along his arms. He assured them he was fine, but his eyes told a different story. The fight had been fierce, and he had not been battling for himself. He had been battling for her. And then came the moment no one expected. Around midday, while Padre Pio was praying in the choir loft, a familiar figure appeared at the entrance of the church. It was the woman, this time walking slowly, almost as if every step carried weight. Witnesses said she looked smaller than before, as though some invisible force had drained her defiance. She didn't storm. She didn't demand anything. She didn't even seem angry. She just seemed lost. She approached a pew near the back and sat down. For several minutes she didn't move. Her hands trembled slightly. Her gaze remained fixed on the floor. A few people recognized her from the earlier incident and whispered among themselves, assuming she had come to provoke Padre Pio again. But those who observed her more closely noticed something different. Her breathing was unsteady, as though she were fighting back tears she didn't understand. Grace often works this way, quietly, unexpectedly, underneath the armor we build around our pride. After about 20 minutes, she stood and walked toward the confessional again. This time, however, she did not stride forward with arrogance. She moved tentatively, almost fearfully, like someone approaching a cliff edge. When she reached the confessional door, she hesitated, closed her eyes, and whispered something under her breath. Then slowly, she went inside. At that exact moment, Padre Pio felt a sharp, piercing sensation in his heart, a sign he recognized. It meant a soul stood at the threshold between darkness and light. He breathed deeply, steeled himself, and opened the small confessional window. Before he even spoke, the woman bowed her head, not in submission but in something deeper: surrender. For the first time, Padre Pio could look directly at her, and what he saw was not the horrifying distortion of before, not the darkness that had coated her soul like black tar. No, he saw a flicker, a fragile, trembling spark of repentance, and that was enough. "What do you want, daughter?" he asked, voice soft, steady, fatherly. Tears spilled immediately down her cheeks. I don't know how to begin." Padre Pio nodded, compassion carving deep lines in his tired face. "Begin with the truth." The moment he said it, something in her broke. Not violently, but quietly, delicately, like a thin shell cracking around a seed finally ready to grow. She began to speak, slowly at first, then with increasing desperation. She confessed her double life, her infidelity, her manipulation, her use of confession as a shield rather than a sacrament. She admitted she had mocked God in her heart, resented her husband, and hardened herself against grace for years. At several points, she sobbed so intensely she could barely breathe. Padre Pio waited patiently. He didn't interrupt. He didn't reproach. He let her purge the poison she had carried for so long. When she finished, exhausted, she whispered, "Is there any hope for me?" Padre Pio did not hesitate. "There has always been hope for you," he said, "but today you have allowed it in." Then something extraordinary happened, something that witnesses recounted for years afterward. Padre Pio smiled. Not a wide smile, not a triumphant smile, a gentle, deeply tender smile, the kind he reserved only for moments of true conversion. "Daughter," he said quietly, "I can see your face now." The meaning was clear. He no longer saw the demonic distortion that had horrified him days earlier. Grace had begun its cleansing work. Light had entered where darkness once reigned. He raised his hand to absolve her. But just before he spoke the words of forgiveness, something unexpected occurred. The woman suddenly gasped, clutching her chest. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but in awe. Later she would describe it as a sensation of burning, as though fire were passing through her heart but leaving her unharmed. Padre Pio recognized the sign immediately. Perfect contrition. The rare moment when a soul experiences profound sorrow, not out of fear of hell, but out of love for God. He completed the absolution slowly, reverently, with tears forming in his own eyes. When she emerged from the confessional, those who saw her said she looked transformed. Not radiant. Conversion does not always make the face glow, but freed. The heaviness that had clung to her seemed gone. Her shoulders no longer sagged, her eyes no longer darted with agitation. She walked outside quietly, unnoticed by the crowd, and disappeared down the road. She returned several times in the years that followed, but never again with the darkness that had terrified Padre Pio. She became, according to some accounts, a devout penitent who warned others never to approach the sacrament with pride. As for Padre Pio, he explained the event only once more to a young friar struggling to understand why he had seemed so shaken that week. Padre Pio placed a hand on the friar's shoulder and said, "The greatest pain in my life is not the wounds on my body, but seeing what sin does to a soul when someone comes to confession pretending to want forgiveness but refusing to let go of their chains. Their soul becomes like a mask worn by the enemy. It is unbearable to look at. But when even the smallest seed of repentance appears, the mask falls away. And then I see them as God created them, beautiful, wounded, and desperately loved." Then he added something the friar never forgot. "The devil hides in darkness, but he trembles when a soul whispers even the smallest yes to God." That is the true reason Padre Pio refused to look at her, and the even more powerful reason he finally could.